it's always terminal. A patient from Huntington's never dies from Huntington's, but it tears the body apart so much that they die from other symptoms. It's also hereditary. Every child has a 50% chance of having Huntington's. When we had our children, we didn't know, because usually the onset is between 30 and 50 years old, so you've usually already had your families. Now, I also lost my father-in-law, a brother-in-law, and a sister-in-law to Huntington's. When my father-in-law had it, that was so many years ago, that they called it adult onset Huntington's. So they said it's not hereditary. So everybody went, phew. Unfortunately, years later, as we found more things happening in the science system to find out where the gene was and everything else, we found out that it was hereditary. My husband was one who always jogged. So he always thought he kept his body healthy by jogging. And he did that up until the time that he was no longer jogging. He was staggering down the street. But he kept moving, trying to keep his body strong. And it got to the point that when you see somebody staggering down the street, what do you think of?
No.
They're drunk. I cannot tell you how many times the police picked him up and brought him home. However, it didn't take him long to realize he was not drunk. This was his condition, this was the disease he had, and they'd just help him and bring him home. Because sometimes he'd get lost. My oldest son, Michael, is who Eric trained, was an extremely intelligent young man. I know all parents say that, but Michael was one of these people who made all A's all through school, all through college, and all through law school. So, I mean, if you can imagine now how frustrating this must be for a person who's always he had a photographic memory, everything was right here. Well, a lot of those things are still up here, but it's taken him longer and longer to express them. So one of my things that I want you all to realize is when you have a special needs patient, like someone who's had a stroke, Parkinson's, Huntington's, take your time. Listen to them. Eric kept up a conversation with Michael the whole time. Did Michael always respond? No, but he never put words in his mouth. Don't ever do that. It's frustrating for him, and in that sense, you're talking down to them. Don't treat them like a child. They're not a child. They're an adult, and they're fully functioning inside here at this point. And this will get a little bit into the medical portion of it. But a Huntington's patient, what sets them apart is you have synapses in your brain. And in a regular person, a person without Huntington's, the synapses probably are firing about 26 or less times per minute. Now, in a Huntington's patient, they start to go up. And when they start to go up, there is a protein that builds up in there, and it's called Huntingtin, with an I-N instead of an O-N like Huntington. But what happens when that starts building up is all of a sudden that pathway now is frozen. So that's closed off. The brain can no longer use that pathway. And bit by bit, all those pathways are closed. Synapses meeting like 27 to 35 times a minute. That person more than likely will never show any symptoms. However, they still have the ability, or chances are more than likely, that they can pass that on to a child. The same thing with the next one, it goes up to 36 or 39. They may or may not ever have any symptoms. And this is where my youngest son falls. He's 45, but he's asymptomatic. He's doing fine. But he knows what's down the road because all of my children helped with their dad. Because he was bedridden for 6 years, and he was on hospice for 5 years. So they had to come in and help me move him and do everything. So they know what they're facing. The affected ones are 40 synapses per minute or more. Now that's where Michael falls in. That's why he's got so many more symptoms than his younger brother has. However, there's even a worse one. If you go up to 60 or more synapse repeats a minute, that's when you usually have juvenile Huntington's. The lifespan is very, very short. It progresses extremely fast. So you want to really be praying that your child never gets the juvenile Huntington's. There are a couple of things that really can help. Healthy foods and exercise. You want to keep the body as healthy and as strong as you possibly can. Huntington's affects all the muscles. The heart is a muscle. You want to keep that as strong as you possibly can, to keep it beating as strongly as you possibly can. When you're training a person with special needs, Huntington's, stroke, Parkinson's, any of those things, I won't preach to you, but I want to give you a little verse. Maybe most of you are familiar with the 23rd Psalm. The second verse says, "He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters." Well, he is the good shepherd. And in this instance, you're going to be the shepherd because you're going to be making someone. However, that sounds kind of harsh. He makes you do something. Well, in the original Hebrew, the word makes actually means he settles you. So I think as a trainer, the first thing you need to do when you're learning someone is learn how to settle them. Make them comfortable. Make them familiar with you. And I think that's extremely important. You know, a lot of times maybe you just need to slow down, take a breath, give your client that moment to think and to get the words out, or even to make whatever work exercise you're giving them. One of the things that's extremely important, don't give them two things at one time. Don't tell them we're going to do this and then we're going to do that. Work on just one thing at a time. Always remember that. Be patient with them. I told you about Michael. It is very frustrating for him even now. When somebody asks him a question, he knows the answer here. But just like with a stroke victim, sometimes it's hard to get it out of his mouth. So be real careful with how you talk to them, how you treat them. I know it's very easy for other members of the family because they're sitting there waiting for the answer and all of a sudden they jump in with the answer. Please don't do that. Maybe you should have seen Eric with Michael. He was always patient. He was always very encouraging. He was very empathetic with him, but he was very positive. Always telling him what he was doing was good. Even if he couldn't get the weights up but so far, instead of getting all the way up where they should be. Michael has been in 2 trials at UCF, which is the Center for Excellence for Huntington's in the state. I think there may be another one up at Shands, I'm not sure. But we have always gone to Tampa for this. The first trial he was in, the Roach trial, was supposed to stop the Huntington's disease, and wherever it was, wherever condition he was in at that point. It had been very effective in the mice and the rats and the monkeys when they were doing all the pre-human trials. It was a very painful trial because they would draw, I don't remember if it was, do you remember 20 cc's of spinal fluid out? And then inject either the placebo or the drug because it was a blind trial. And he had to do that for about a year. And on top of that, he had to have a brain MRI. Can you imagine sitting in the MRI for an hour while they're scanning that? So it was a very, very rough time. The best thing about the Roach trial, though, the drug that they were using, was in the mice, the rats, the monkeys, everything that they had tested them on. It actually started reversing the synapses. It started clearing out up to 20 to 30%. So we were extremely hopeful that this might be effective. However, the Roach trial was stopped very abruptly. And we didn't get any word for a long time, and then it sort of jumbled back that maybe the results had been corrupted in some way. So everybody worldwide was cut off from this trial. Well, the trial that he's in, that Michael is in now, the drug is supposed to stop the cognitive decline. And I will tell you, this has been a blind trial too, but the last trip to Tampa that Michael made, he scored higher on all of his cognitive exams than he ever had. And the last time that I took him, when we got ready to do, because he does them orally and then he does them on the computer too. He was getting ready to do them on the computer, and the nurse that was in there said, okay, this is going to take about an hour. He was through in 35 minutes. So, I mean, that was a very positive influence for him. Well, now it's at the second stage of that trial. So what they're going to do is give him the medicine full time. It won't be blind anymore. He won't be getting any placebos. So our fingers are crossed that that's what he's going to do, that he's going to get the drug. He does have some cognitive decline. When, you know, the neurologist asks him, well, could you start handling the finances of your household again? He says, I probably could, but I don't want to because I'm afraid. So there's that fear is always there whenever they're doing something like that too. My hope of any of you all working with a person with the special needs like this, with Parkinson's, with Huntington's, with a stroke, anything like that, I just hope that you would realize that their muscles need to stay as strong as possible. Some of the things that are extremely important are their balance and their mobility. So those are areas that need to be worked with a lot, because Huntington's patients will fall a lot. You know, because they start stumbling. You watched Michael come in some days. Yeah. When he would be extremely tired, it'd be horrible. He would just really be staggering. And you have to realize too, when you're thinking, well, they're not eating enough, Huntington's patients, because they have all these uncontrollable movements going on, they're burning calories, probably more than you are when you're training somebody, because it goes on 24 hours a day. Their appetites are not always good. My husband's was good. Michael's was not. It still is not. However, after a training session, I'd always take him out to eat. He would eat then, but he enjoyed going out to eat, and he enjoyed, I think, our time together. So that was extremely important. One of the questions you all asked was, how did it affect him mentally after he exercised? He was always, I think, a little bit sharper, because the endorphins are released after you started exercising. He would be much more talkative. He would be a lot more expressive after we would be at Eric's for a while. I think you just need to make sure after each of these that you're still encouraging them. Eric kept talking to Michael about it's important to eat and not just take your protein shake. You do a little more than that. You have to be putting calories into your body. One of the things that I told Eric about, one of the men in my church has Parkinson's, and he's been going to I guess it's a gym of types in Orlando. I think it's called Rock Steady. It's just for Parkinson's patients. It gives them the mobility, the hand-eye coordination. Yeah, and that might be something you want to incorporate with, you know, when you're training.
How was your ability to compartmentalize the stress in your life?
For me?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure dealing with it all, there was a lot of stress. I mean, on top of like whatever normal life brings as far as financial stress, all those different stresses, but now you have to deal with like the neurological aspect of everything. Like, how were you, like, did it take a while for you to compartmentalize the stresses of everything?
Oh, it did, and I will tell you this, for me personally, because all of a sudden, especially with my husband, things changed. I was now handling everything. He was no longer capable of making decisions. That was part of the stress that you have to deal with. But I found myself cutting off emotions, which is not a healthy thing for me to do. But that was the only way that I could take care of him. He was in bed for 6 years with a feeding tube and with a catheter. I had to feed him every 4 hours around the clock, and this was with working full-time too. So, I mean, those were the kind of things that were difficult. I got to be doing some medical things that I never thought I could. He had a PICC line for several months. I had to learn how to give him his medication through that PICC line, flush it, and keep it clean. His feeding tube, the last time it blew out of his stomach, the hospice workers always kept extra catheters in the house. I measured how far in that was. I used the catheter. Put it in, filled it up, the little ball up with the saline solution they left. So, I mean, there's lots of things that happen to the family. But it is hard to I can't even talk. Compartmentalize. Yes.
Yeah, I guess hopping off a little bit of what Erin just asked, because it was a lot of stress on you and your body, and things just changed.
Right.
I guess what was your outlet? Like, what did you find yourself kind of going to find that peace, to find that drive to keep going and making it work?
Part of it, a big part, was reading. For the last 3 years of his life, I got out of the house 1 day a week for just a couple of hours. A friend of mine who was an LPN came and sat with him. Because of the feeding tube, because of all the breathing ailments that he had that goes along with Huntington's, all of a sudden, I couldn't just leave him with a sitter. It had to be someone who could handle these things. That was my trip to the post office, the bank, the library, and the grocery store. And that's what I did for 3 years. I got out for about 2 hours, and that was it. So I would come home every week with a stack of books like this, because I could sit in his room with him and read. He kept the TV on, or I kept the TV on for him so he could watch something, but it was, after he passed, I gradually integrated myself back into society, and then started singing with a big community choir. I joined a book club because I could finally get out and go to one. Became active again in my church because I hadn't been able to even go to church for all those years.
Yes. Your trials for the cognitive decline, is it specifically for Huntington's disease, or is it something that they've used in other pathologies and have learned that this might be an option for you?
I don't know. I'll have to ask Michael or his wife if that's used like in Parkinson's patients or any place else.
Well, even, I mean, I have a husband that's PTSD and TBI, and so there's dementia and Alzheimer's onset. So
Right,
there's,
right.
If they've used it in those kind of patients.
That I don't know. I'd have to find out. Yes.
Coming in to see me, what were your expectations from the result? What were your expectations from me? Meaning the results from the working out. What did you expect from me?
One, I really hoped and prayed that his quality of life would be improved. Because once he was a little stronger, he could do more. He could participate more in his family life. His outlook on life would be better. The one thing I will have to say about Michael is his attitude has stayed positive. Has he been through depressions with this? Yes. Did I go through depression when I was dealing with my husband? Yes. There were times that I didn't want to talk to anybody, see anybody. And I'm sure my husband felt the same about me. Just as soon I not be there. But it was, as many trials as it probably brought more blessings than anything else. Because our family became a much stronger unit. All of my children helped. And Michael was the biggest help because he just lived a few doors down from us. So he was there on the weekends to help me get his dad up and out of bed and into a lift chair. Or to help get him up. The hospice had given us a rolling shower chair. So I was able to roll him into the shower and give him, a complete shower. So all of these things were so good. And the best thing about all of this, 6 years bedridden, except for when we could get him in his chair. He never had a single bed sore. But that takes constant moving of him. And Michael knows that that's his future.
Is your youngest son on a regimen of any sorts to try to prevent or help?
He's very careful what he eats.
He's always
He's a
been
lot.
healthy though.
Yeah, he's always healthy.
Yeah.
He's got his whole gym, you know, with all of his weights and weight bench that he works out all the time with to try to keep his muscles as strong as possible.
From some of our reading and research in the advanced class, you know, we were reading sometimes people with Huntington's disease, their range of motion during exercise is abbreviated, short. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I had that with Michael. And, you know, I don't know if I was just stubborn as a trainer or OCD, but I didn't accept that from Michael. And I would talk to Michael, we need to get a full range of motion. And I had to think, how am I gonna get this full range of motion? Because he was short. You know, on a bicep curl, it would be short range of motion, he'd stop. And occasionally I would get a full range. It wasn't that he was too tight to do it, but I would have to communicate with Michael and still have that expectation. I didn't lower my expectation for Michael, and he would do it, you know. And sometimes I had to stop and say, let's start over, let's you know, and give him some teaching techniques on how to, and so on. And he would do it. And we also looked at, when we were training, you know, we noticed tricep push downs. We couldn't get his body to function that motion so well. And you heard me talking to him with that. And so I didn't try to force a square peg in a round hole and say, and keep drilling it. I thought, all right, let's try a different approach. So instead of doing the bar, we went to single arm rope. We tried single arm rope. We tried double arm extension with the dumbbells. And it was amazing. We came from different angles, and he had better control of that, and we were more successful. I said, you're doing great. Or even the mental part, we would do push-ups on the Smith machine. We had elevated the bar a little bit, we'd do push-ups, and I guess some of it was the processing, you know, the push-up. Remember, he'd drop down, he'd push up, and then he'd pause for a long period of time. And before we go into it, I said, listen, Michael, we do a whole lot better if we can keep you moving non-stop. Just keep moving. Don't pause. Get rid of that pause and just keep going. And I'd be kind of his cheerleader as we go. Keep going, keep going, keep going. And I got on him a little bit. But man, when he did that, it went really well. So it took some trial and error on my behalf. You know, how do I approach? How do I communicate? How do I get more out of this exercise? Or how do I change my communication? How do I change my view of this exercise in what's acceptable? You know, it might not have been the most perfect thing, but where's my line of acceptability that he's not going to hurt his shoulder and so on. It was a lot of, you know, understanding what was going on and not being too strict on form, you know, but realizing he's safe and so on. And we did well, you know, we did well. But, you know, the one thing as I was listening to you talk about balance, you know, yes, I was always concerned with his balance, knowing that where I stood, and I always tell you guys, stand in a place that you're useful. So when Michael would get off the incline bench, you know, I didn't go too far from his side, knowing his balance wasn't there, because he'd stand up, even though that incline bench was pretty low, he had to step over to get away from it. And there were some times he caught his foot, but I was in a position that I was useful, and I was there to catch him if he needed me. You know, so you got to think that way too. You know, so as you say that, you remind me of things that I had to concern myself to keep him safe. To keep him safe, because if he fell down and hurt himself, then he's out. You know, he could be out 2 weeks, he could be out a month, you know, healing or more. So, you know, I needed to be attend to him and be in a useful place and not treat him as somebody who's got great balance or my classmate. I had to be there for him, you know.
Right. And he still falls.
Luckily, I mean, he slipped off a bench one time lying on a bench, but other than that, we never had a situation where he fell in the gym.
I don't think he has fallen recently, but
So he is mobile. Is he practicing anything now that helps?
no.
So, question for you. when you decided to contact Eric about training Michael, and obviously when Michael decided he wanted to do it, what were your hopes and what were his goals? I mean, what were you looking for specifically, would you say?
One, to get him out of the house, which is extremely important, so they don't get so bogged down.
Okay.
Two, it was as much for mental stimulation
Okay.
as it was physical stimulation. I think he needed that. He needed to be around other people. And Eric was a good one to be around. I wanted him to get physically stronger. Michael had been a cross-country runner. And to see him now doing nothing, and I think he only weighs like 126 pounds right now. So he has gone down to even much less than he was when we were with you. And like I said, it stimulates the brain too.
Yeah.
When you're exercising. Not just the endorphins, but just actually being out and doing something. I wanted his quality of life to be improved.
Outside of seeing Eric, and what was, how much research did you put in to finding a trainer, knowing this condition? Or did you just throw a stone out there? How much research did you do?
Yeah, I just threw a stone.
Yeah.
Eric had told me, he had worked with my brother for what, 25 years?
At least. Well, he was my workout partner for 18 years, and he was older than I was, and I'll tell him, he unfortunately had a growth in his stomach, and a small growth, and he was like my best friend, and he unfortunately had a stroke during that surgery, recovery from the surgery. They didn't thin his blood correctly, and I'll get into that. We had a heart valve replacement,
Yeah.
and they put a
He had a
titanium valve,
aorta.
which the good thing about titanium valve, it lasts a long time versus the pig valve, which is what, about 7 years, and he didn't want him to break his chest open and redo this surgery. I think he threw a clot to the brain and one to the heart.
And one to the brain stem.
And I worked after a long time in the hospital. He was about 6-7 months in the hospital. He went through rehab, and I'd worked with a few people with stroke, and Gerald trusted me quite a bit, and I attended his last appointment at the rehab facility. And I said, Gerald, I want to go with you to the facility. I want to see what they're trying to achieve. I want to see what they're doing with you, and we can take it next step. And so anyways, I worked with Gerald, and we made some really good advancements, and some of he trusts me, and I knew him really well, and we pushed hard, and we got him to the point, the last rehab facility appointment, he could not walk. They had the strap around his waist, he got on the parallel bars, and he couldn't take but maybe 1 or 2 steps and fall down, and we got Gerald back to the point that he could walk, and he could drive his Porsche 911 stick, and he would walk into the gym, and he was doing pretty well. I was going to his home and working with him in his home, and we continued to work out, stretch him, and so on. But so you kind of knew, from your brother, our relationship and so on, and that I was very comfortable working with special populations. And Gerald wasn't the only client that I had trained that had stroke, a massive stroke. I probably had 4 people that had massive strokes. I couldn't tell you how many people I trained over the years that had TIAs and so on.
Michael and I had been going to another gym, but I was not pleased. There had been no special, when I say no special, they had not studied anything about it. They weren't prepared to deal with a person with his particular needs. So that's when I called my brother and said, I need to find a different gym. And he said, by all means, call Eric. So that's when we called him.
I appreciate he did. I enjoyed working with both of you, and as I said, it made me a better trainer, working with Michael.
So it wasn't his rugged good looks?
That definitely was nice.
I
had hair when they
So we solved a lot of the world's problems while we were there.
Oh, hell yeah, we did.
If only they'd have listened to us.
Exactly.
We wouldn't have gotten in trouble if anybody else was there.
One of our students 10 years ago, his name's Albert Latoupe, started the Rocksteady version of it up in Boston. And they did it specifically for neurodegenerative diseases such as dementia, Alzheimer's, things of that particular nature, and it's hugely successful. And one of the major reasons you mentioned before about exercising and blood flow to the brain, but not all exercises are equal. With regards to boxing, it's much more neurogenic, so it stimulates more brain cells and stimulates the hippocampus. So my question that I did have was, is Michael at Rocksteady?
No, because the one in Orlando, I think, only takes Parkinson's
Oh, okay.
patients. And you were talking about the brain to the blood. One of the things you need to be familiar with, that you can encourage your clients to have, is there are a few foods, and only a few, that can cross the blood-brain barrier. Blueberries, elderberries, there are just a few things, and if they do nothing but get a protein shake and put a handful of berries in it every morning, that helps stimulate the brain too.
Berries are also low glycemic as well, so it's a slow release and a drip feed to the brain, so it's wonderful.
I wanted to ask too, as far as before workouts or like a specific time of day that Michael preferred to work out, or what sort of preparation was done for him prior? No preparation, it was just,
No preparation.
just go.
One of the medications Michael takes makes him extremely sleepy, and there'd be days that he wouldn't get up until noon. So ours is what, at 11?
11 o'clock. Yeah.
So I still had to get him up, but he wouldn't, not me personally, but get him up early enough. And finally, Eric got him to at least eat a little cup of applesauce before he came.
Yeah, because he'd come in with nothing.
Yeah, and he would really wear out extremely quickly when he had nothing
So-
in his stomach.
A sort of difficult question. At what point do you decide to stop working out and training? I mean,
When Eric closed his gym.
oh, wow. Shame.
Yeah, trust me, I
You
can
did.
get on that.
Come on.
But you know, the other thing too is when you came in originally, and I think this is what you're doing at the previous gym, you were working out together, weren't you,
Yes,
for the hour?
yes.
And I didn't think that was a good idea. And I didn't know Michelle very well, and I didn't know how she'd receive this, but I said to Michelle, I said, I think you guys should work out separately. And I said, I think I should work with one of you for the first half hour, the second half hour work out with the other. I just think that it's you two, your goals are too different. I need to give more attention to Michael. And I did say that to you, and I didn't know how you were going to receive that. You know, because some people are like, I want to, but you know, the goals were different, and it probably 90% of my time would have had to been with Michael, and just said, go do this, and which wouldn't be good. But it was received well. So even though the client came in and said, we've been doing this at the previous gym, you know, I didn't know how that was going, but my own experience, my own self said they should be working out apart. So I suggested, I think I even said, if it goes well and you two want to bring it back together down the road after I get a good grip on where Michael is and where you're at, and we can try to bring, we can. But I think for the beginning, at least we just kept it apart, and it actually worked real well. Because by the time Michael was done that 30 minutes, we did the assisted P&F stretching, we did ab work, we did the workout every time, and basically that was the workout every time. We did stretching, we did ab work every time, and we went right into the workout. You know, he was done. 30 minutes was plenty. So to try to go the hour based on how many calories his body's burning, the amount of calories he was taking in, you know, and I know he enjoyed that meal after with you, and I was jealous. I wanted to go all the time. But you know, 30 minutes was perfect. He was done. I mean, he'd go up to the front desk and sit down and take a nap, or sit and relax and watch what's on the thing. He was done. 30 minutes was perfect, so it did work out. So the point of that long-winded story was, you as a professional have to sometimes suggest and say it in a way that would be received well. If you feel this route that they've been on, just because they've been doing it with somebody else, doesn't mean it's the best route. If you as a professional realizes this would be a better route for us to go, communicate that in a way it'll be received well, and express it. And hopefully your client doesn't come back and say, no, we want to do this. Lead them that way if you feel that that's the best route, and it ended up being a good route.
Yeah, it did. Okay.
I just wanted to say that your strength is inspiring.
Oh, thank you. There were times I didn't have much strength. It's hard to watch your husband or your spouse, but I can promise you it's 10 times harder to watch your child.
But I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.